The full moon cast an ethereal glow over the archaeological dig site, illuminating the weathered faces of the research team. Dr. Elena Vasquez brushed dirt from a small metal object and held it up to the light, a tarnished silver locket. Inside was a faded portrait of a woman in Elizabethan dress. Another connection, she whispered, adding it to their growing collection of artifacts. 3 weeks into their expedition at the newly discovered site near Salmon Creek, the team had unearthed more evidence suggesting this might be where some of the Roanoke colonists had relocated. The hidden star marking on John White's map had led them here, to this remote area in Bertie County, and each day brought new revelations. James Harrington, the team's historian, carefully documented the find in his journal. "That's the third personal item we've found with distinctly English characteristics predating the Jamestown settlement. And in the same stratum as indigenous artifacts. Integration, not conflict," Elena nodded, her eyes bright with excitement. "Just like the DNA studies suggested." Their discovery 3 days earlier of a structure with both European and indigenous architectural elements had sent ripples through the archaeological community. If verified, it would provide physical evidence of cultural exchange rather than the violence or displacement that dominated earlier narratives about the lost colonists. Back at their makeshift laboratory, Dr. Wei Chen analyzed soil samples under a microscope. "The pollen record confirms continuous habitation here from approximately 1587 through 1605, he announced. "And these charcoal layers suggest at least 2 significant fire events." "Cooking fires or destruction?" asked Elena. "The pattern suggests controlled burning." "Cooking, metallurgy," Wei replied. "Not the random distribution you'd expect from an attack or accident." Sarah Locklear, the team's liaison with the Lumbee Tribal Historic Preservation Office, studied the settlement layout projected on their digital map. The distinctive arrangement of buildings followed neither purely English nor indigenous patterns, but something uniquely a hybrid community adapting to local conditions while maintaining elements from both cultures. "My grandmother always said we carried the blood of the lost ones," Sarah said quietly. "Our oral histories speak of pale strangers who came not as conquerors but as refugees, bringing strange tools and customs. They learned to live as the people did, and in time, became the people." James nodded respectfully. The historical record failed where memory persisted. That evening, a storm rolled in from the coast, confining the team to their tents. Elena used the time to video conference with Dr. Malcolm Reynolds at the genetics lab in Durham. "The results are extraordinary," Reynolds said, his voice competing with the patter of rain on canvas. "We've identified specific genetic markers consistent with 16th-century English ancestry in 8 family lines from the communities surrounding this area. The temporal analysis suggests mixture occurring within 1 or 2 generations after the Roanoke disappearance." "So they didn't disappear," Elena replied. "They simply became someone else." "Precisely. The colonial perspective saw only absence. But the evidence suggests transformation, adaptation." Reynolds' image flickered as lightning struck nearby. "The Spanish documents you sent are particularly interesting. Their spies in London reported that Raleigh had secretly instructed the colonists to become as ghosts if threatened." "Strategic disappearance," Elena mused. "Not a tragedy but a calculated survival mechanism." The next morning dawned clear and brilliant. As the team resumed their work, local volunteers arrived to help sift through the excavated soil. Among them was Henry Dare, a retired schoolteacher who claimed distant kinship with Eleanor Dare of the original colony. "My family kept this for generations," Henry said, showing Elena a small, smooth stone with faint carvings. "Never knew if it was authentic or just a family story, but with what you're finding here." Elena examined the stone carefully. Unlike the famous, Dare stones discovered in the 1930s and later proven to be forgeries, this modest artifact had never been publicly disclosed or tested. The weathering pattern appeared consistent with genuine 16th-century exposure. "May we analyze this?" she asked, already envisioning the tests they would run. Henry nodded. It's time for answers. By midday, their ground-penetrating radar had revealed something unexpected, a hidden chamber beneath what appeared to be a communal structure. As they carefully excavated the entrance, tension mounted among the team. This was deliberately sealed, Way observed, noting the layered clay construction. Preserved intentionally. When they finally breached the small chamber, they found it contained wooden chests, remarkably preserved in the oxygen-poor environment. Inside the first chest lay a journal, its pages brittle but legible, dated 1589. James carefully photographed each page before attempting to translate the faded Elizabethan script. As the words emerged, the team fell silent. We are become neither wholly English nor wholly Croton, but something new upon this land. Those who sought us meant us harm. Those who find us now, if they be of peaceful heart, may learn the truth of our choosing. We did not perish. We did not surrender. We transformed. That night, as the team catalogued their discoveries, Elena stepped outside and looked up at the same stars the colonists had observed 4 centuries earlier. The mystery of Roanoke had never been about disappearance, she realized, but about perspective. The colonists hadn't vanished, they had evolved beyond what their contemporaries could recognize or what historical narratives could accommodate. We found you, she whispered to the night. Not as the lost, but as the transformed. In the distance, beneath the moonlight, the ancient trees of Salmon Creek stood silent, their roots entwined with the remains of a community that had refused to disappear, choosing instead to become something entirely new, the first true Americans, born not from conquest but from cooperation, adaptation, and survival. Sarah joined her outside. Tomorrow we notify the State Historical Commission? Elena nodded. And then we rewrite history. Or perhaps, Sarah suggested with a gentle smile, we simply correct it. Above them, a shooting star traced a brilliant path across the sky, an ephemeral reminder that some journeys end not in disappearance, but in transformation.